Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to a late September Thursday night football edition of our Establish the Show for the Showdown here on Thursday night. Fun one this week. We're coming off Brissett, Mitch. This week, we get two top five quarterbacks from the 2020 NFL draft class, Tua Tagovailoa against, of course, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. So this should be a fun one. I'm Gary Hartman, joined as always by the Showdown niche sports king himself, Cody Main. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, Gary. Joey Burr, the Ice King in the all whites tonight is going to be a sight to behold. Jamar Chase in the all whites, hopefully prancing past this Dolphins secondary. I'm excited for the Showdown slate, man.
Yeah, it's sexy stuff. I got to say, I was just saying to you off the air, I'm like I just want to jam as many of these studs as I can get. And I know that's not like the optimal way to play here, but and I'll talk about it when I kind of give some of my thoughts, but I would be shocked if the optimal captain doesn't go from Joe Mixon up here as I have sorted by what I have sorted by salary or whatever. I would be or I guess you could throw T. Higgins in that group, but I'd be very surprised if from T. Higgins up, the optimal captain was not in that group. I don't know if you feel differently.
I totally agree. And we're coming off the slate, and a lot's been made about it. And shout out to the Run Pure guys. Big T was all over the captain kicker stuff, and it turned out to be a phenomenal call. Got the captain kicker, Graham Gano, who ended up being optimal and allowed you to get all of the guys that you needed to get in there because it was so condensed, and you needed to have Saquon and Zeke and CD. You needed to have all those guys, and really the only way to do that was to throw in someone like Graham Gano who could give you 15, I think, points from the kicker position, 15 or 16 points from that kicker spot. And, we're kind of in a similar situation here where we're starved for value, but I totally agree with your point off the front that one of these guys is going to separate. And that's our job is to try and identify which guy it's going to be. But I really have a hard time thinking that some of those value options can come close enough. And that's what Gano did. He came close enough to give you the value, but also to give you the raw points that you needed in the captain position. I really have a tough time seeing that happening tonight. Even if this game plays, below expectation, it's a 47-point total. These offenses are so explosive, and all of these options themselves are so explosive that one of these guys is going to give you that performance that you need.
Exactly. And the difference here is 38.5 over under versus 47,
right.
Tua versus Burrow versus Cooper Rush from Daniel Jones. We have maybe CeeDee Lamb, Saquon, and Zeke as superstars there. Here we have a bunch of guys with capable quarterbacks to get them the ball. It's just a little bit of a different situation. While I think kickers and defenses will be viable and figuring out how and when to use them is critical, and we'll get into all that, I do not think it's the same as Monday night. Quick shout out to the Solver by chat. Yeah. Go check
shout out to the Solver. I'm so excited to use that and so excited to see this develop. Man, I'm pumped. I'm pumped for the Solver.
So if you don't know what we're talking about, we just launched over at ETR our own software site tools, highlighted by our new optimizer from our team behind the scenes, as well as ETR, a fantasy data, money data tracking software as well. More coming there, but yeah, definitely check it out. It's in beta right now. Can't recommend it enough. Really excited to get involved there as well. All right. All that said, Cody, let's dive into this fun Thursday night game. Let's just talk some macro stuff here. What when you were doing your deep dive and your research, what stood out to you?
Yeah, let's talk roster construction utilization, because I know that's kind of been a big topic recently, and the field I think is becoming a little bit more aware of hey, I can start creating unique lineups just with my overall construction, right? If you just play 1-5, you're immediately eliminating 97% of the field tonight just by playing one Dolphin, 5 Bengals. And when we talk about this roster construction, we're just referring to the number of favorites that are rostered in your lineup compared to the number of underdogs. And tonight, the way that as we get into here with some of these options is, as pricing is set up, the Bengals are not only A, 4-point favorites, but they're also B, priced so much better than some of the options on the Dolphins side, and they project better because they've got the higher team total. And then you also have this narrative Miami's coming off, their defense is coming off facing Josh Allen for 91 plays in 100+ degree heat, 4 days rest. You're hearing all of those narratives. Everyone that I've talked to, everyone that I've seen on Twitter is on Bengals 3.5 or Bengals 4 now. It just seems like this is setting up for the field to be really in on these Bengals heavy teams. And you can see it in our roster construction projections. You're going to get a lot of 4-2s tonight, even quite a bit of 5-1s, which we don't see so much. So from a macro perspective, and lately I've just been hand building 5 to 10 teams. I feel like I can control the correlation and the ownership and the uniqueness so much better just hand building. But even if I'm just hand building 5 or 10 teams, I'm so much more into like having a portfolio that includes some of those 2-4s, which just means 2 Bengals, 4 Dolphins, and hoping that this game plays more in the Dolphins' favor than maybe the field and the public is projecting.
Yeah, I think that's all great points. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to doubt Mike McDaniel either at this point, because I think everything does add up to this being a Bengals spot. Obviously, they finally got their first win under their belt. They're at home. As you mentioned, they're going to look sexy in those white unis. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to doubt what the Dolphins are doing over there. I do think they're a legit good team. I'm a little worried about Tua's back, and we'll talk about that as we get to quarterback here. But yeah, I'm actually doing the same thing. And, I know I'm a GPP opto bro, but I've been playing the last handful of Showdown slates just because, I've been wanting to get better at it. And I have also been hand building like anywhere from like 5 to 20 lineups. And I agree, you really can control your portfolio. You control your correlation. I think, I'm not saying, if you're a 150 guy, don't use an optimizer, but I think it's way less efficient to do it for these Showdown slates than it is for a main slate. So, that's just a little aside there. Yeah, but the 1.5s you see there, 3.6%. That's saying basically 1 Bengal, 5 Dolphins, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So the 5-1 Dolphins onslaught is not out of question. And the other thing I'll say is, as concentrated as the Bengals talent is, you still do have a top end running back there. You still have Tyler Boyd. You still have Hayden Hurst as legit options as double stacks. The Bengals are even more concentrated than that. We're looking at Tua and Hill, Waddle, and then I guess pick your poison of one of those running backs if you're really getting involved there. I'm a little bullish on Edmonds tonight, but you're not really feeling great about Sherfield or Smythe or Gesicki even. So I'm not, obviously this is a 1-game Showdown slate. We're using those guys, but as far as doing those onslaught lineups, I think it's easier with the Dolphins being so concentrated. So it's definitely a way to get different here.
Yeah, I do totally agree. You can load up on those 4 options from the Dolphins. The guys that we know, and Silva talked about it in his matchups column, like a monopolization of the target share. You can feel pretty good about loading up on those 2 guys, Waddle and Hill, as you alluded to, and then you can get a little bit different with your Bengals options. Obviously, if we expect the Dolphins to be winning this game in those 2-4 style rosters, you might see maybe a little bit more Chris Evans, or you might see a little bit Samaje Perine, and you might be able to get these more unique options on the other side of the ball.
Yep. And we talk about this a lot. Like, P. Ryan's the kind of guy that makes sense on the other side of an onslaught, right? The RB2 who's been still playing in passing downs. And we'll get into all that as we go position by position. Anything else just from a general slate perspective, macro wise or otherwise?
Yeah. Last macro take, we talk about this a little bit. Some slates are really easy to build lineups. I think the Giants Cowboys slate from a salary perspective was really easy to build lineups. A lot of the optimal lineups were leaving money on the table. Tonight's not going to be the case. Like, it's really tough to make lineups that you feel good about because you're probably making 1 or 2 really tough stands per lineup. And we'll get into those at the skill position spots and at the quarterback position. Like, you really have to make some strong stands tonight. So I will just say that, like, if you're leaving even a little bit of money on the table, that's going to go a long way to being unique tonight, because everyone's going to want to spend as much as they can to get these studs in there.
Yep. Agreed there. All right, let's dive in to the players on this slate, obviously starting at quarterback. And I was reading through your breakdown, listed in the same article here on Established to Run, where the projections are. And you mentioned you believe Burrow and Tua are both underpriced here.
I think so. I've been tracking the captain salary stuff, dating all the way back to 2020, 2019, even a little bit. But, quarterback salaries have come up kind of to account for just how good they are from a base level. That way you can't just jam them in at the captain spot and move on. We've seen quarterbacks in kind of the 8K range. Quarterback pricing on the whole has been up, and that includes some slates that have, Mitch and Jacoby Brissett and Cooper Rush and Daniel Jones. But overall, this season, quarterback pricing has been up. Now we have, 2 premier options, I think. And no, they're not the unicorns that we see with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, but the base projections for both of these guys are really strong on 2 offenses that are above league average in terms of pass rate over expectation. The Dolphins have a top 5 offense in terms of explosive pass rate, first in pass EPA per play. Like, I think both of these quarterbacks are really strong options. And on a normal slate, I would expect them to be like 10-4 and 10-2 respectively. So I think we get a little bit of a discount here. And because of that, I know we'll get into some of these receivers, but because of that, I think you have to start your cash game roster construction with Joe Burrow and Tua. I think you're making a mistake if you don't. You lock up all of that passing offense by having those guys. And then I wrote in the article, I usually don't roster these guys that don't have that rushing upside in the captain position. I think both of these guys make a little bit of sense there if you can get those doubles, and maybe even with these offenses triples too, extending out to some of these tertiary options on each passing offense. So, it's tough to say that you like these quarterbacks on slates that include Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyreek and Waddle, but like I think that these guys could come close enough to their pass catchers that the little bit of a discount that you get is enough to keep them in captain consideration.
Yep, agreed. I agree with you there. Any concern about Tua's back? Obviously, he had that explosion game in week 2 where Silva noted in his matchups that he was the second overall quarterback in fantasy, or maybe number 1, either him or Lamar, right? That week in fantasy, I guess he was number 2. And then besides that, he's been both 22 and 24. So, that outlier game is going to spike him up the boards as far as his fantasy performances this year. But, we've seen one incredible game, and I don't want to overreact to that. Obviously, this is in Cincinnati. Cincinnati has not been giving up too many big games to fantasy quarterbacks, and he's been dealing with this back injury. So I'm a little bit concerned. If I was kind of picking which quarterback I'd be leaning into more, it would be Burrow, but I don't know if you feel differently.
Yeah, really weird game script that second game in his favor, where like they fell behind and then they just kept scoring and scoring and scoring. And like I was to the point we were all in on the Tua doubles and the Lamar singles with the bringbacks on that Sunday main slate. And like I was to the point where I was thinking maybe Tua's going to get pulled. And then he just kept big play after big play after big play, and they got back into it and they ended up winning that game. But not to take away from like the other 2 games were weird too, and you can't take away from his performance against the Bills too much because he got banged up, and then also Josh Allen was on the field for 91 offensive snaps. Like it's going to be tough to produce fantasy points in those situations. I will say my Tua lineups are going to be played as if they're playing from behind, because I think that's when we're going to see that insane pass rate, and that's when we're going to see the possibility of them just going full, for lack of a better term, full Buffalo Bills, where they're just throwing on every offensive play. And that's how I want to play my Tua team. So it won't be any sort of like, I think this is a close game script, or or I think the Dolphins play from ahead. This is going to be a situation where like I think that they need that the Bengals push them into this super up tempo and super high pass rate offense tonight. So in those lineups, I'm going to be bringing it back for sure with the Chase or a Higgins or even Mixon, and expecting them to be pushed in a back and forth type of game.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. I want to be heavy on those 2 lineups there. In those situations, Burrow, I guess the hardest thing for me to figure out when I go through like this Bengals situation is basically if I want to captain Burrow, why don't I just want to captain Chase, right? Like it's a hard thing for me to get through, and I know that obviously it can be, Burrow could be the captain, Chase and Higgins can have similar stats, or Chase can have a major game, but Hayden Hurst also has 2 touchdowns, and so Chase only has 1 touchdown and Burrow has 4. Like there's situations where it doesn't happen, but I think the majority of the time, and this is the same thing I say about when I do main slates, like if I'm playing Kirk Cousins, I lock him with Justin Jefferson. If I'm playing Matthew Stafford, I lock him with Cooper Kupp. And I get it's not the exact same situation here, and obviously Showdown is different, but why shouldn't I just be doing that? Like, why shouldn't I just be locking Jamar Chase every time I want to put Joe Burrow in my captain spot?
I'm with you, and like I would accept some pushback on the Joe Burrow stuff, at least in terms of captain, especially at 12% ownership, because it is so. You could say the same thing about Tua, but the reason why I like Tua a little bit more in the captain position is you have these Trent Sherfields of the world, you have Gesicki, you have Durham Smythe, you have like all of these really tertiary options who, if they're getting pushed, they're going to be on the field, and they're really cheap. On the Bengals side, like it's going to funnel through T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, maybe Tyler Boyd, but Tyler Boyd is priced up. Hayden Hurst maybe a little bit too, but like it's harder to make a case where Burrow's targets are more evenly distributed to guys that you can also roster alongside the premier options. At least with Tua, you've got the cheap guys that can make the salary work. So I'm kind of with you that like, hey, maybe instead of Burrow captain, maybe we just go Chase or Higgins and captain and pair him with Burrow in the flex.
Right. Yeah. And I'm saying let's not write out the Burrow captain lineups at all. But if you are doing that, I would think about triples even in those situations or something like that. And I know you mentioned in your article, you would consider locking them with one of the especially Tua, like you would consider locking with one of the 2 major pass catchers for him. And I think that does make a lot of sense.
I think you almost have to, because I talked about in the article, you need the targets to be evenly distributed. If they don't, then you're just going to get and if they're not evenly distributed and you get the Tua eruption game or the Burrow eruption game, it's so much more likely that Tyreek or Jamar Chase or Higgins or Waddle is going to even outscore them in the quarterback, the quarterback ceiling performance. So you want to have the pass catcher in that situation. So yeah, if I do end up with, my 5 to 10 hand builds with some Captain Tua or Captain Burrow, it's going to be a double at least, and it's going to have like one of those, secondary or even tertiary options. Like for Burrow, it might be that I include him with Hayden Hurst or something like that to really capture that Joe Burrow eruption spot.
Yep, makes total sense to me. Cool. Anything else on quarterback to consider before we dive into their skill position, guys?
No, just to circle back, like cash game musts for me. They're too cheap. They make the salary work, and you're capturing all of the passing offense with those guys in there.
Yep. Agreed there. All right, let's go over to running back. And it's two very different stories on each of these teams. Obviously, we're highlighted here by Joe Mixon, who's, also you noted, and I know it's been a popular take around the industry that he's a buy low right now if you can get him in season long, because his role has just been so elite.
The role is awesome. And I didn't even realize how good it was until, I came into looking at this slate, leads the league, or not, doesn't lead the league, is like top 5 in the league in like most categories. 2nd in carries, 7th in red zone carries, 2nd in carries inside the 5-yard line, 3rd among all running backs in targets. And that last point was the big one for me, because this Dolphins defense has been giving up some big games to opposing running backs through the air. And, namely last week with like Devin Singletary got there through the air. James Cook even popped a little bit for like 4 for 37. But this Dolphins defense has just been getting sliced by running backs that I don't even think they're playing. They haven't played like a ton of true pass catching running backs or offenses that even target their running backs through the air very much. So I could see a big Joe Mixon game through the air tonight, especially if this is a back and forth affair. But regardless, like he's just so involved in this offense, and buy low, I totally agree with that. I like Joe Mixon at captain, where like the 9K price tag is really nice, and his ownership could get squeezed tonight because you have all these pass catchers around him. Yeah,
and Samaje Perine's still involved on these third down plays and everything like that. Don't get me wrong, but Mixon's been maybe I was listening on Zach Reason's pod, but I know his targets per route run have been really, really strong for a running back, especially someone of his talent. And I like when he's always been a good pass catcher to me. They've just been hesitant to use him in that role. We know he's getting all the goal line work. The matchup doesn't really scare you. I mean, there's a lot here that I like, and I don't mind pairing him in Burrow stuff too. And I talk about this all the time in my large field GPP articles, that the field is not pairing their running backs with quarterbacks enough, especially ones that can that can then catch passes. And so I definitely don't have an issue with him being an expensive double, basically, with Burrow or like a Bengals onslaught type of thing. I don't mind that at all. Other side of him is the aforementioned Pirine, and he's pretty expensive here, 7,400. That seems kind of crazy.
So Mixon got banged up with an ankle, I believe, in the Jets game. Didn't play nearly as much, and still boasts those big carry totals and target totals without hardly playing all that much against the Jets. And so I think what DraftKings was doing there was pricing Pirine up just in the event that Mixon was out. But Mixon is fully removed from the injury report, and I know people in chat are talking about Mixon's going to leave earlier. Mixon's banged up. He doesn't come into this game with an injury tag at all. So the $7,400 price tag on Mixon, like if you're playing Mixon, you're just doing it to be unique, and you're just doing it in hopes that like maybe Mixon is more limited than we're projecting. Though I don't think that is a wise bet to make tonight.
I don't think there's any reason to think Mixon's limited here. I think Tua has a better chance of leaving the game early than Mixon does. Tua's banged up with an ankle and a back, and So that said, Pirine probably won't be very owned. I mean, we're seeing 8.2 total ownership here. I wouldn't even be surprised if it's a little lower than that. I mean, 7,400 with all these stars on the slate, it could be I think it's even a stretch to say it's such a bad, it's a good play just because of how expensive he is.
Right. I mean, it's if he was, 5,400, like then it's so bad. It's good play because he could still get there at 5,400, like 7,400, man. He's not only got to like hope that Mixon leaves early with an injury to get there. Like he's actually got to perform once he gets in there. But he is still going to be involved in like, could he luck box a touchdown? Yeah. But if you're hoping for that, why not just go bet like his anytime touchdown score props?
Yeah.
As opposed to playing him in DFS.
Agreed there. All right. Chris Evans for me. I mean, he just hasn't really been involved. You can see we're not really projecting him for anything. If you wanted to throw him in as a punt, If you need the salary, he won't be owned. I think it's okay in a 1, 2, 3% sprinkle if you're doing a 150 set, but I'm not necessarily excited about going there. All right, Dolphins guys. You see a big difference in the price between Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert. I don't think their usage split is reflected in that same price. So, I mean, Mostert seems like more of a value for sure, considering how much he's been used, and you're getting that $1,800 difference. But to me, game script reads like a Chase Edmonds night. How do you feel about these two?
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm happy to hear that you're on Edmonds as well. I think he's an awesome leverage play tonight off of Mostert. The $4,400 price tag, as we've already talked about, on a slate that is starved for value, like the $4,400 price tag on Mostert is going to feel pretty nice given his base projection. But I'm kind of with you that like this sets up as an Edmonds game. And, I know Edmonds is losing a little bit of base work to Raheem. They're basically like 50-50 in terms of rush rate over the last couple of weeks. But like when it gets into money time, long down and distance, 2-minute snaps, inside the 5 attempts, we saw that last week with Edmonds. Like if they need a guy to get them some yardage, either whether it be through the air or just in high leverage situations, I think they're going to go with Edmonds. And, I wish he was a little bit cheaper because I think his ownership would still get kept in check. But like at 6,200, I think he can blow this price tag out of the water at, minimal ownership. You see, we've got 23% there, only 25% from Raheem Mostert. I could see that gap being even wider come close to lock. So I'm in on Chase Edmonds as like a really strong flex play tonight at lower ownership.
Agreed there. And I already mentioned I kind of like him on the other side of onslaught stuff. If you go 4-2 Bengals or 5-1 Bengals, I usually like picking on that pass catching running back that can be taking dump offs to the house type of thing in those situations. Not to mention he's going to get his base work anyway. I don't dislike Mostert. I think Mostert's fine. He's 4,400. He's going to be obviously a little bit higher owned, but I do think the Edmonds ceiling is significantly higher tonight.
Yeah, and I think, sure. I mean, Raheem is like in play for cash because of the salary that he saves for you. I don't know if I would get there. I don't know if he's as good a play as the kickers that we'll get into, but I certainly think he's in play for cash. That $4,400 price tag is really nice.
Yes, agreed there. Alec Ingold is a fine punt. We've seen these fullback tight end guys be involved. He's active. He plays a little bit. He's fine if you need the salary. Anything else on running back here? I don't know if
no, I think we covered it. Let's check FanDuel here because we know these guys with touchdown upside, touchdown equity have a little bit more playability there. Similar story on Chase Edmonds too, Samaje Perine, too expensive over there to play.
Agreed.
Pretty similar story.
I agree. Very similar story here. Mostert, I think I like more here just for, as you mentioned, touchdown equity, not full point PPR. I'm not nearly as bullish on Edmonds on FanDuel as I am on DraftKings. All right. Wide receiver, I think the most fun position on the slate for sure. We have 4 legitimate fantasy superstars, all guys that were top 4 round draft picks, 3 of which were top 2 round draft picks for season long going into the season. Jamar Chase definitely leads the way for me. He's due for an explosion game for sure. I know you wrote in your article about some of the reasons you like Jamar as well tonight.
Yeah, and it was Jordan Vonnick from the 33rd team. Shout out to them. Ryan Reynolds is still writing our waiver wire column over here, doing a lot of award stuff for us at Establish the Run, but working for the 33rd team as well. And I saw it come across my timeline, and he was talking about the man coverage rates and the blitz rates for the Dolphins defense and how well Jamar Chase performs against those types of defenses. And looking into the numbers, he's absolutely right. The Dolphins blitz the league's second highest rate. They're playing man a ton, and Jamar Chase just eats in those situations. And the $11,000 price tag compared to $8,200 for T. Higgins is going to maybe shift ownership a little bit. I know it's really close. I don't see any one of these guys getting particularly steamed or squeezed, but I think Jamar Chase's ownership could come down, could be held in check. And I think that he could just destroy this Dolphins man coverage defense, and particularly if they're blitzing. Joe Burrow is going to be getting the ball out of his hands quickly. That benefits Jamar Chase. He's going to be, hopefully racking up the yak tonight. But I wrote in the article, could see this classic 10-101 style receiving line from him tonight. And, if I'm making only one lineup, Jamar Chase is going to be my captain.
Yeah, agreed there. Absolutely. He's my guy too tonight. And especially if as you mentioned, he's going to get, if salary pushes him down at all, he's my guy. I want to be over the field no matter what, though. I think it feels like a Chase night. Before we talk about the Dolphins, guys, let's talk about Higgins, though, because that $8,200 does seem cheap for what we know T. Higgins can bring. T. Higgins always projects well for us at ETR for good reason. I mean, he's basically a 1B. Like, let's not really beat around the bush. The ceiling's higher on Chase. We saw that last year, but the floor case is very similar, if not maybe even higher on T. And it's not like T doesn't have a ceiling. It's just that Jamar has those explosion Tyreek Hill type ceilings where T. Higgins might not be that high. He might have a 30-point ceiling. Jamar Chase has a 40-point ceiling. These are both great plays, though. Higgins at 8,200, though. We have 50% ownership. That seems right. I don't know how high he could really get, but he could be high.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like with these other options on the slate, and we haven't even talked about the Miami side, a normal slate, T. Higgins, 8,200, this offense, this setup, like you could see, 60, 65%, but you got all these options on the other side. His quarterback is still relatively cheap. I think T is like a question in cash games that we have to consider. And, generally we're not targeting wide receivers in cash games nearly as much or nearly with the frequency that we are the quarterbacks and kickers and some of these more locked in volume spots. But $8,200 T. Higgins, and you mentioned it, like wide receiver 1A, 1B on this team, the target competition or the target rates for these guys, Higgins and Chase, are like identical. You know what I mean? And so you're getting a $2,800 discount. That's why I think in some contests, and maybe the single entry stuff that I'm playing, like you could see this ownership gap widen a little bit, and you can maybe see like a 60% Higgins and a 40% Chase. I don't know if it would be any more extreme than that, but Higgins is a phenomenal play in his own right. I just think that maybe we see that alpha game from Jamar Chase tonight.
Yeah, agreed. And if you can afford it, doubles are definitely in play. This is definitely one of the traditional double stacks that I do not avoid. I talk about a lot how I think wide receivers eat into each other's ceilings, but these are guys that the way Burrow plays, what their weekly floor ceiling combinations are, they can both get there together when Burrow hits his ultimate ceiling. So
before we move on to Dolphins or these other guys, I just want to ask you quick, because 8,200 and 11K, that's, you're locking up 19.2 in wide receiver salary. If you're playing, if both of those guys hit a ceiling that puts them in an optimal lineup as a flex, like would then Joe Burrow have a higher ceiling as the captain there? Or
yep, I think so.
Okay,
I think so. I think if I was putting one of them in a captain, I would significantly negatively correlate the other one.
Right, because if Jamar Chase gives you the 40-point game, like it's so much less likely that Higgins is going to give you even 20 or
Same with Higgins. I honestly think you can almost make a rule if you wanted to, and I get it's really dangerous, and you know this way better than I do. You can make a rule to leave the other one out when you captain one of them, especially Chase, because of how much money it is going to be to do that, and like what we need from him, considering Higgins may have an actual higher volume floor. But I know that's a little risky, but you could definitely consider that.
We've talked about this a lot, just negatively correlating, and the solver isn't set up quite yet to do the negative correlation, but labs or any of your other optimizers, if you want to just do that slight negative correlation so it doesn't happen frequently, but you still allow it a little bit, I think that might be the best way to handle that situation.
Yeah. Any interest in Tyler Boyd here? Obviously, he's coming off his first big game of the year. To me, the target volume is just not enough for me to invest, but he certainly is a pivot and leverage off the other two guys if one guy goes down with an injury, or, just if the off chance that he has two strong weeks in a row.
Yeah, and I think I just saw we took an under on Tyler Boyd, which doesn't impact our DFS decisions. The 7K price tag on Boyd, I mean, he's only $1,200 cheaper than T. Higgins. That's going to keep ownership extremely in check. If you need to find a way to get different, like in your Joe Burrow doubles, or just a way to get different as like a one-off, the 7K price tag is he might be the guy that's like so bad that it's good, because he can still get there. He's going to be on the field for 90% of the dropbacks. He still has the ability to earn targets. We just haven't seen it a lot this season, especially with, surrounded by two alphas in Cincinnati. He's not going to consistently earn targets. We just saw a ceiling game last week, though. So if you are looking for a way to get different, I don't mind Tyler Boyd, but like in my main style lineups, he's going to be away from him.
Yep. Agreed there. Cool. Let's go to Miami and our guy, Jalen Waddle. Our guy is on our FFPC main event team. He's been really great to start the season. He's been out targeting Tyreek Hill just by a little bit, but in the red zone as well, which is significant. But both guys have been getting there seemingly on a weekly basis. But Waddle's a little banged up going into this game. It sounds like he's a full go. I don't think we should be really projecting it as if he's going to be very limited. But we do have Bo in the chat asking, is Hill a lock with Waddle less than 100%? I think you could definitely, if you're looking for tiebreakers on these two, you could definitely think about that type of thing. And then the other thing about Tyreek Hill, and then I'll just throw it to you to give me all your thoughts here, is Eli Apple thing is legit. I mean, I think the matchup's really good for him. The extra motivation's there. And it's Tyreek Hill. The ceiling's higher just by being Tyreek Hill. So how do you feel about these two Dolphins guys, and how are you approaching them?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And we are looking for tiebreakers, or, how to weight the side of a coin. Because I think this is a true 50-50. And I mean, if you look at the usage through the first 3 weeks, it's actually Waddle that leads in most categories, 29.7% target share to 28.7, 41.8% air yard share to 35.1, 30.8% red zone share. Tyreek's yet to be targeted in the red zone. Same thing with the end zone target share, 33.3% to 0. All of the metrics favor Waddle in this matchup if you assume that he's 100%, but there is that slight risk, and we're not projecting him to be less than 100%, but there is that slight risk of re-injury or coming off of that injury that he's not 100%. And you mentioned the Eli Apple thing, man. I wrote it in the article. I don't ever weight narrative stuff. Like that is meaningless to me.
Yeah,
in most situations.
You leave that to me. I
leave that to you. You guys know me. I'm a spreadsheet socialist, and the numbers tell me what I should do. But man, if you watch that post game interview when he found out that he's got the Bengals on Thursday night and that he gets to go up against Eli Apple, and on top of that, if there's a coach right now in the NFL to trust to scheme up his player touches to squash some beef or to look awesome in prime time, my bet is on Mike McDaniel. So, I'm looking for tiebreakers in these spots. I think Tyreek Hill, if I'm not going Jamar Chase, I think Tyreek Hill is a freaking awesome play tonight. I think that these two alpha wide receivers could just duke it out in a battle for the ages tonight.
Agreed. Totally agree there. And you mentioned how much money you're going to be investing if you went Chase and Higgins together.
Yeah.
You go Hill and Waddle, you're going 21K. It's very difficult to do. But, if you are doing a Tua captain or a full-on onslaught, you can afford it. I don't think you rule it out. I haven't played around with construction enough to see what that would even look like. But this is coming from a guy that basically said I wouldn't put them in the same lineup together right before they went completely off. So I will never rule that out again. It's remarkable stuff. So, they're both great plays.
And you're interesting. That's an interesting point on playing them together, because we always talk about like how certain combos that are like high owned or projected to be high owned individually could be low owned together.
Yep.
Tying up 21K in salary in this Bengals pass attack is going to be low owned, in and of itself. So if you think that there could be that style of performance like they had against the Ravens, which is total outlier, 99th percentile outcome, like if you think that is within their range again tonight, then 48.6% ownership on Tyreek, 39.5% projected ownership on Jalen, but like together, they're not going to be owned in the same lineup hardly at all, because it's how much salary you tie up with that.
That's what I always talk about, getting contrarian in a chalky environment, like figuring out different combinations of guys that, even though individually they're all going to be owned together, doing those types of combinations will be different. Or specifically like on a main slate, not that this has anything to do with tonight, when you see a game that's going to be heavily attacked, like the Bills Ravens this Sunday, how can you get different within that environment while still getting the pieces that you need to get? So I think the same theories can be applied to Showdown here, and that's one of the ways to do it.
Exactly.
Another way to possibly do it is figuring out which of these cheap wide receivers you play as well. So the Dolphins are definitely the team that you're picking on more for the cheap wide receiver of it all. Obviously, Hill and Waddle are going to be dominating that outside wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 duties. But we do have a handful of guys here that should make the pool. River Craycraft, Cedric Wilson Jr., Trent Sherfield all make my pool tonight. I know Craycraft has a couple touchdowns already. He's already been called up for this game. Cedric Wilson is he questionable here?
Yeah, I was just looking up his status. He is questionable with a rib injury. I haven't seen an update. Of course, if he's out, that's going to clear things up a little bit, but unfortunately it's going to clear things up in a way that it's going to drive ownership to these guys. So I almost kind of hope that like Craycraft, Wilson, and Sherfield are all active. It makes it a messier situation for us to figure out, but it's also going to reward us with lower ownership. And I think these guys, you mentioned that they're in the pool, like they're definitely in play tonight, especially in these games where we expect the Dolphins pass rate to be elevated. I think my favorite, just from a baseline, knowing what we know now, is Trent Sherfield. He's a guy that's still on the field quite a bit, regardless of Cedric Wilson's status. And, we've got an okay projection on him. He's 1,400. He makes a lot of this stuff work. And I don't think we see the ownership get steamed up much more than 10%. Could even come in a little bit lower because you just have a couple of options to choose from right here. So, if you're trying to find a way to make these Tua doubles or Tua triples work, or just looking for a low owned one-off, I like Trent Sherfield quite a bit.
Yep. Makes sense to me. I think Rivers is fine, but you're paying up for him a little bit. And let's see what happens with Cedric. Mike Thomas can make the pool as the punt as kind of the wide receiver 4 there. If you want to sprinkle him in, it's fine. I'm not going to any of these other receivers really. I mean, we see a little projection on Stanley Morgan. I guess he could also be in there if you wanted after Mike Thomas, if you need the $600. Neither of them are very good plays. All right. Tight end. Hayden Hurst, we saw him take a little dip in usage last week. I think we expect that to come back up here, and he is the most expensive tight end on the slate. Would also be my favorite. I mean, the role for him in week 1 and 2 was strong. I think he'll be going out for a bunch of passes. He makes sense as a double or triple piece with Burrow stuff. How are you feeling about Hayden Hurst here tonight?
Yeah, you nailed it on Hayden Hurst. Weeks 1 and 2 usage was, pretty elite for a tight end in terms of his route participation, was actually getting targeted a little bit, fell down in week 3 because of the injury. But again, another guy that's been removed from the injury report, not expecting any limitations tonight. I like him as, the second receiving option if you're playing your Burrow doubles, or, just as like another way to get a little bit more unique. But the $5,400 price tag is really what keeps him in play, because we've seen these tight ends get priced up a little bit too much. And I think $5,400 is fair for him. So I certainly have some interest in Hayden Hurst tonight.
Yep. Agreed there. I guess the punt tight end on Cincinnati is Mitchell Wilcox. Take that for what you will. Let's talk the Dolphins, guys. Mike Gesicki, we shout out to ETR for us being on this as we kept bumping him down and down our ranks as the season went on, and his ADP kept getting hit as well. But clearly Mike McDaniel is not interested in using Mike Gesicki in the same way that previous regimes were. We know he's a good pass catcher, but it really is only in pure passing down situations that we can even expect him to be running the same type of routes he was doing last year. And even then, you bring in Tyreek Hill to this offense, it's just the ceilings are not the same on Mike Gesicki this year. At 5,000, we're looking at a total ownership of only 10.5%. That's fine to me, but I'm not forcing Gesicki at all.
Yeah, it's really hard to get to Gesicki given his route participation and his involvement in this offense with Hill and Waddle soaking up so much of it. I will say the one type of game outcome that I am playing Gesicki in is like the game that they had in week 2 against the Ravens, where they were really in come from behind mode the entire game. And it seems like Mike McDaniel knows what he has with Gesicki, because in that game, he put him out there for 60% of the routes. He ended up getting an 8% target share, which is fine. And can pay off in those type of game environments. Yeah. But if they're not trailing in a big way in this game, or even if they're playing from ahead, Gesicki's not going to be out there. It's going to be Durham Smythe, because he's a better pass blocker. He's a better run blocker. They just have no need to put Gesicki out there in those situations.
Yep. Agreed there. And you mentioned Durham Smythe, he's the guy that will play quite a bit, could fall into the end zone on a jumbo pack. I always talk about those kind of guys that are more pure blockers, but can easily see some volume just by being out on the field. I don't have a problem there. Anything else on tight end?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about everyone's favorite showdown topic. That's DST and kickers. Let's address this question first. Let's talk some cash real quick. Are any of these guys making your cash teams if you were to make an optimal cash lineup here?
Yeah, 100%. I think you almost just have to. And, unfortunately, DraftKings decided to price down both kickers, which I think is going to elevate ownership. The average showdown kicker price has been 4,000 all season. Now we've got Evan McPherson, who's 3,600, Jason Sanders, who's 3,800. These guys usually play better in high total games, or, in the situation like we had with Dallas and New York, where neither team can score and they all just get stopped in the red zone and you get 5 field goal attempts for each one. But in a cash game, it's both kickers for me ahead of both defenses. And I think the best cash team tonight is going to have both kickers.
Yep. And it's looking like a nice night for what that's worth, seeing 60 degrees, barely any wind. And we know McPherson's got a leg, and Jason Sanders is a great kicker himself. So 2 good kickers. If Tua's banged up at all, we could see those drives stopping there as well. And then if the Bengals do win and cover, McPherson could get there even if the offense is moving. So I'm more into the kickers than the defense here. But do you have any takes on defense in general here too tonight?
The other unfortunate thing is like there's such a lack of skill position talent down below, I don't know, 5K or even 6K, like that the ownership on these defenses is going to be elevated. Even in a game where we project a lot of offense, I think defenses are going to force their way into lineups. You see 20% own
Yeah.
for each of these options. That's pretty high in a game with all of these offensive options and all the skill position players that we want to play with a 47-point total. Usually you see this around 10, 12, 14%, but just because of the price tags and the lack of cheap skill players, I think the ownership's going to stay up. So, in large field tournaments, I'm kind of steering away from these options and trying to force myself into more uncomfortable builds with like some of these 5 and 6 and 7K skill position players.
Yep. Agreed there. It's kind of a coin flip for me on which defense I prefer personally. You get the discount with the Bengals. They're at home. They're favored. Tua's might be throwing up some bombs. That could always lead to something big there. But Miami, Cincinnati's offensive line has not looked like we'd hope. Burrow's been sacked a ton. Miami probably has a little bit more talent in that front seven as well. So like it's kind of a coin flip to me. Josh mentions that Reader's out for the Bengals, kind of a big nose tackle stuffer in the middle there. Yeah, that could help the running backs up the middle a little bit. These are all things to consider. But yeah, I mean, if I'm 150ing, I'd probably kind of put myself right around the field on defenses just because I know it makes the salary work and I don't force anything specifically.
Yep. I agree there. You guys can get questions in while we wait here, and then we'll get to flag plans. I will say that like, because of the way the salary stuff works out tonight and the fact that you might just need one of these DSTs or kickers to get you like 8 or 9 to end up being optimal so you can fit everyone else. I'm not really too worried about like who I'm playing them against, if that makes sense. Like I think you can create more unique combos and still get the raw points that you're going to need for a lineup to end up being optimal. And what I mean by that is like I'm okay playing Dolphins against 3 or 4 Bengals, if that makes sense, because they might just give you that pick 6 or that strip sack that you need in order to get in a winning lineup.
Yep. Agreed there. Good point. Well, people got their questions in. We looked at running back on FanDuel. Let's take a quick look at receiver here. Sorry, I'm still on DraftKings. Let's take a quick look at receiver here. Is anything standing out to you? I mean, Hill's more expensive than Chase over there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I hadn't even looked at the price tags over there. Chase 13.5, Waddle even up there at 13.5. Higgins looks equally underpriced over there. So if you're trying to look for a cash game roster construction for FanDuel, Higgins looks to make a little bit of sense. But man, like that 13.5 price tag being $500 cheaper than Tyreek and, the same price as Waddle, maybe that inflates ownership over there a little bit more.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. And are you as the Showdown historian would know this more than me, but are Showdown players results oriented based off what happened in the slate prior or the previous 2 slates or anything like that?
They're usually not, but this one was like almost so public and won in such a big way. And again, shout out to Ron Pure. Like I wasn't taking any veiled shots at anybody because of the captain kicker lineup. It's mostly just a bit. We've been playing Showdown for 3 years now, and captain kicker and captain DST has historically been negative EV plays. Obviously, it got there in a big way for big players in the industry and for a lot of people last week, and it became such kind of a public thing that like I've got the highest projected ownership on captain kicker tonight that I've ever projected. I've got 2.6% on Evan McPherson, not because of the results, but because of the way the salary works out. And if you play captain kicker tonight, you're going to be able to fit in a lot more of those offensive pieces. And yeah, maybe there's a little bit sticking in the back of the field's mind of like, hey, this just worked out last slate. Why can't it work out again here? So the highest we've ever seen in Showdown for captain kicker, at least as long as I've been tracking it, is Evan McPherson himself in last year's Super Bowl. He was 2.7% owned at captain. And, I think he could come in around there because it's a similar setup. It was last year, it was Kupp and Higgins and Chase and all those guys that you needed to fit in. This slate is kind of the same thing with Hill and Waddle and Chase and Higgins. I think a lot of people will go to the captain kicker and just try to fit in as many skill position players as possible.
Would you do that? Would you consider the captain kicker tonight? No, usually you're off that, right?
I'm not playing. I won't play a single lineup with the captain kicker. I don't know if I ever will.
Same. I'm not doing it either. Same with defense either. Same with defense.
And the reason why is not that it's a negative EV play for a couple of reasons, because it wins so infrequently compared to how often it's owned. Is number one reason. B, they're unpredictable. I know Justin Freeman from Run the Sims has looked at this. Like if you told a computer model the finishing score, the yardage, like a bunch of stats from the game, and then told it to predict what is the kicker's DraftKings score. Like it has like a 0.1 R squared. Like there's no correlation, so it's really tough to predict. And then see it, like once you captain that kicker, in order to build an optimal lineup, you end up spending all your salary. You end up playing all the best plays around it, generally speaking. And so then it leads to more duplicated lineups. So there's just a few reasons why I'm really not into captain kicker. It can work for you. If it wins, I won't be alongside you.
Yep. Kellen, yeah, if you go back to the beginning of the show where we talked about quarterbacks, I mentioned some hesitation. I think Cody's a little bit less concerned than I am. But if I'm losing for a tiebreaker on which quarterback I'd use more, I'd have a slight lean towards Burrow, although the Tua stuff's a little bit more natural, I think, over there. What else? Yeah. This is an important question. Very important question.
You know what? Like, do you have a take here? Because the more that I think about this, I mean, the shower narrative stuff, like Adam needs to update the narrative rankings, because you know what I see in Philadelphia, and I know Devonta Smith is coming off a big game, but like, didn't Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts shower together in college?
Yeah.
But have you seen the best friend narrative? AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, like this best friend narrative thing, man. Now we've got the breakfast narrative with Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford from last season. Like there's something to this one.
I do think this one is very clear as far as who showered more together on these two, and we'll take this question very seriously. And that is very clearly Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. They only drafted Jamar Chase 4 overall over Sinai, the big offensive tackle from the Lions, due to Joe Burrow being there. Waddle, before he got drafted, had some weird stuff that if someone asked him if he preferred Mac Jones or Tua as a quarterback and he said Mac Jones, this is very clear. This is very, very clear. Burrow and Jamar Chase are one of the all-time shower narrative couples ever.
Good take. Good take.
Anything else? Thoughts on Tua tonight? If he blows out, does Tyreek still perform? Or if he bows out, he could, I mean, you've seen that sometimes where the number one receiver will get there without their quarterback. It's just less likely.
Yeah, definitely. We talk about this a lot, going back to the unique combination stuff. If you want to try and find a way to get unique without having to like totally punt it off with some of these guys or play some really weird stuff, you could play a captain Tyreek without Tua. Yeah. Maybe Tua gets injured, or maybe Tua just throws everything to Tyreek. In the way that the salaries work out, you don't need Tua, but Tyreek still has a 30-point game. Yeah. Totally possible.
Totally. This is an important question. Yeah, it's going to still be Richie James with David Sills and probably Darius Slayton on the outside. All right, that's enough. Let's do flag plants. Very important flag. It's a tough flag plant slate, man, because again, like all my gut is saying to do a top guy, right? Like there's a couple mid-tier guys that I can make an argument for, but I'm just looking at the top.
Yeah, and go up to DraftKings. We're not flag planting any FanDuel business.
My bad.
You know what? Like it's so hard to flag plant on this slate because my heart of hearts does think it's going to be one of these top guys. Flag plants portion of the show is generally reserved to a guy that we're like, way higher on relative to market, and is also going to kind of be low owned, kind of flying under the radar. But like, you guys, I just don't think that happens tonight. I'm not going to steer you wrong by just flag planting somebody because they're low owned. I think that Jamar Chase is going to be the guy that gets you there. I think Jamar Chase is the guy that you need tonight as your optimal captain. Alpha wide receiver 1 for this team. We talked about the blitz rate from Miami. We talked about the man coverage rate from Miami and how well Jamar Chase performs against those defensive coverages. I think we see just like a classic, like Jamar Chase reminds us he's that dude tonight and gives us a 10 reception, 100-yard, 1 touchdown performance, and that's enough to get you the optimal captain tonight. So it's not fun because it's not low owned, but I do think that there could be some outcomes where he comes in well under that 50.8% total ownership and under that 11.4% captain ownership, because the 11K price tag is pretty tough to fit.
Yep, can't argue it. He would be my top guy also if I was going to one of the top. But just to give the people something a little different, I'm going to steer away from the Higgins and above tier, even though I already mentioned I don't think I'm doing any captain lineups that are not the 2 quarterbacks, Higgins, Waddle, Hill, or Chase. But I'm going to go Chase Edmonds as my flag plant here. I think the narrative's getting a little bit out of control that Mostert's kind of gotten this fully split or even a little bit lean towards his way. They still gave Chase a big contract in the offseason. If he can have a little bit of success on his early down work this game, I do like the Bengals. I do like the Dolphins to be playing from behind here, and I think Edmonds can rake up a bunch of catches. Give me 1 touchdown for Chase Edmonds, and I think you need him in your flex spot tonight. So I like Chase in most of my builds because you can make the argument either in a 4-2 where the Dolphins are coming back and you want him with Tua, or you can make him in an argument on like a 4-2 Bengals where he's the guy coming back when they're trying to make a comeback. I think he fits both game scripts, and for that reason, I like Edmonds at not too much ownership, 23% total. So,
way to balance out the chalk donkey over here, just eating into the 50% on highest projected guy on the slate.
If there's ever a slate though, that it makes a ton of sense, because like I would be doing, him or Hill or something too. I just wanted to give the people a mid-tier play to consider as well. But this is the slate that it makes sense. All right. I think that will do it. Other Showdown shows this week. I don't know what our deal is with Sunday night yet. We'll get back to you on that, but we will be around for Monday Night Football to end week 4 there. We'll be as active as we can in the Discord. Any questions you guys got tonight, but enjoy this one. It should be a fun game, and we wish you all the best of luck. Take care, everybody.